Most of the time that you'll be working in After Effects, you'll be working in the timeline panel. So we're going to take this movie and talk a little bit more about this area. First, let's talk about how to add footage from the project panel to your timeline. There are several ways to do this. I can select an object here in the project panel. I can drag and drop in the composition panel if it's important to me where this object goes. I'm going to hit Command-Z on the Mac or Control-Z on the PC to undo that. Now, if where the layer exists in time is more of a priority to you, then simply select the object in the project panel, then drag and drop it over here in the timeline. You'll get a mini little current time indicator here indicating where in time you will drop your layer, and then let go. Your layer's endpoint will be where you let go of the mouse. Again, I'm going to undo that. I'm going to re-import this a third time to show you that you could also change the stacking order of the layers, which we'll talk about momentarily. But I could change that while I'm bringing in my layers as well. So I could have it at the top of the stack or towards the bottom. Again, I'm going to undo that. Oftentimes, I just want to quickly add assets from the project panel to my project. I want them to start at the first frame of my composition. I want them to be centered in my composition panel. And so there's a great keyboard shortcut for that. Basically, you can select the object again in the project panel and hit Control or Command /. By the way, / is the one with the question mark on it. So Command ? Control ? And that will add that to your project, make it the top layer, make it start at the first frame of your composition, and it will center it in your composition as well. Now I'm going to undo that by hitting Control or Command-Z. One of the most important aspects of a timeline, obviously, is the timeline. And so being able to move around is very important. We have our current time indicator here, which we can just simply select and drag. Now, current time indicator is quite a mouthful, so oftentimes it's just abbreviated as CTI. So again, you could click and drag the top of the CTI around to tell you where exactly you are in time, or you could simply click on the top in this bar here where these numbers are to jump to a particular point. The best way to get around is by using keyboard shortcuts. You could use the home key on your keyboard to jump to the first frame of the composition. The end key on your keyboard will jump you to the end of your composition. Again, that's not the letter N, that's actually the button end. And also, page up will take you back one frame at a time. Page down will advance you one frame at a time. If you hold the Shift key down while you're doing that, it will jump in 10 frame increments. So if I hold Shift page up, I will jump back 10 frames at a time. Shift page down advances 10 frames at a time. You could also navigate in time by scrubbing the current time area, which you could find in the upper left-hand corner of the timeline panel. This display tells you exactly where you are. So basically it reads from left to right, hours, then minutes, then seconds, and finally frames. So currently, my current time display is at 6 seconds and 2 frames. I can click this to scrub in time to move it left and right as I hold down my mouse button. I could also single click on it once to open the Go to Time dialog box if I know exactly the frame I want to go to, and I can just type it here and click OK. Now we have here several layers. I could actually use the wheel on my mouse with this panel selected to scroll up and down through them, or I could use the scroll bars on the far right-hand side of the timeline panel as well. Now these layers work just like Photoshop. They're all individual objects stacked on top of one another. And just like a stack of pancakes, as you start piling stuff up on top of the bottom one, then you can't quite see the bottom pancake because you're looking at the top pancake. So for example, as I'm looking around, I have this blue flower, which is beneath these stripes, and I actually want it on top of the stripes. So I'm going to scroll down till I find my blue flower layer, and I'm just going to click it and drag upwards in the layer stack, and then let go about here. So now it's the top element. Also similar to Photoshop, we have these eye icons, which indicate a layer's visibility. So we can click this eye to remove visibility, say for example for the blue flower or for the text. Now we could also choose to solo a layer, which means that we view only that layer. If I solo this text layer, which we do by clicking this little space beneath this circle in the timeline panel, then we view only the text. You could also solo multiple layers, contrary to what the name solo might imply. Another thing you might find yourself doing often in the timeline panel is moving layers in time. So I'm going to hit the home key. And as I preview this animation, let's just scrub it here. We have text that fades in before the lower third that's supposed to be behind it comes on screen. So what I want to do is I want to click this layer and drag it to the right. And what that does is that it makes it start later in time. So it actually doesn't appear until later on in my timeline. The last idea I want to share with you, and a couple tips here, is how to select layers. Most edits only take place on layers that are selected, so it's very important that you have the correct layer selected. Now you could go here in the timeline and just click a layer to select it. But sometimes these compositions get pretty big and that might not always be very convenient. One of the things that helps is to simply type the number of the layer. So if I want to select layer 1 on my keyboard, I can click the number 1 and I select layer 1. For double and triple digit layers, I could simply type numbers quickly. So if I type 1, 2, then layer 12 is selected. I could also use the keyboard shortcut Command or Control and up and down arrow. So I'm on a Mac, so I'm doing Command up arrow to move up in the layer stack, or Command down arrow, and again on a PC it would be Control up arrow or Control down arrow. And that's the basics of how to get around the timeline.